Hi, I'm Jeff. This is Tropical Plants at 53 degrees north. So I've done it again. I have almost killed one of my plants. So this time it's a Nepenthes. It's Nepenthes burkei. And what happened was I put it up in the rafters because I think they look really good hanging from the rafters, and you can see the pictures really good. But we're at that time of year where the sun is getting higher into the sky, and because of the aspect of my greenhouse and the sloping roof, if we do get a little bit of sun, and honestly it must have only been like a couple of afternoons of sunshine, and what happens is it burns some of these plants. And I'll show you what's happened to this particular Nepenthes in a minute. So we're all about saving and repotting a Nepenthes burkei today, so let's jump in. And we are in. Okay, so despite the fact that today it is an absolutely miserable, horrible day, it's pouring it down, it's very, very dark outside, and not really the best kind of light for tropical plants. Well, in here, of course, I've got my grow lights, but you can see there, see the dark stretch there? Well, that is one of my shades that I've had to put up, despite the fact that we could well easily get snow, we could easily get frost, and no doubt we will do. I've brought them down to there on this side of the greenhouse, and I left that bit open because I know those plants underneath are okay. But unfortunately, too little too late, because that one, I've just done it literally 2 minutes ago. And what I'd done is I'd hung in the rafters up here. This is my Sologene speciosa. And I'd hung my Nepenthes burkei from there just because I think they look really good. And obviously you can see the slope of the roof there, sun perpendicular to that coming straight through, adds up to not a very healthy Nepenthes. And literally over the space of 2 weeks, what I'd noticed with this Nepenthes down here, it still looks reasonably okay, but some of the pictures have begun to die off now. Sorry for the shakes, I'm just getting down on my knees here. This one has begun to die off, and not because it's old. The one in the centre there has begun to die off. That one there begun to die off. And what had happened was the media had completely dried out to the point that it had shrunken away from the sides of the pot by about 1 centimetre. And I kept watering it without actually pulling it down from the rafters. I was just like reaching up, as you do when you're tall, and pouring the water in, and I kept noticing that the water was coming through like instantly, straight away, as it would if there was like holes down the side of the pot. And it didn't occur to me what had happened, because obviously we've only just, like literally a week ago, got rid of our beast from the east, where temperatures were well below zero and the wind chill was like -9, -10. It was very, very bitter cold. I mean, I know I've done this before. It's that time of year that it's very, very difficult to keep on top of these things. I've had a poorly doggy as well. And that's more important. So I've had the unfortunate situation where I just couldn't get in and couldn't do a proper job. So everything I've been doing has been a little bit of a rush. Normally I would get it down and have a look, but in this case I didn't. I reckon it's been about 2 weeks. We can't have had more than a couple, maybe 3-4 afternoons of sunshine for when that happened. So I'm hoping I can save it. So what I've done here, I left it overnight in this bucket of water, and it has actually expanded the media, but I haven't repotted this in a couple of years, and I think now actually would probably be a good time to get in there, because I can still see a gap down the side, and it would likely happen again if I can't get it to fill the pot properly. So I think it's a good opportunity to get it out of its pot and have a look at repotting one of these things. Not an easy job, bearing in mind that you've got all these pictures here. And the roots and Nepenthes are very, very fine, but we'll have a go and we'll see what we come up with. I've done it before and quite successfully, so I'm sure we can do it again, and this video then can stand as one of my test cases of how to repot a Nepenthes. So let's get started on that. Okay, so this is what we're dealing with here. This is what it looks like hung up, and I'm just letting it drip through because obviously I've had it in the bucket. Right, so damage. This one's damaged. Why? Because when it was in the bucket, I stood on it. This one, you can see the lids going on it, and it's not that old a picture. Probably, I think that one was last year. I think it was 2020, like towards the end of last year. That one is the newest picture, so as you'd expect, that one seems to have survived okay at the moment. Still plenty of nectar on it. That one's going over. So it might be that I cut that one off. I'll leave that one a bit longer. I think I'm going to cut that one off because that's no use to anybody. And I may well take that one out that's been growing in the moss there. Looking at it now, it's not actually that bad. Inside it's not that bad. But there's always like a lag with these things in Nepenthes because they're such slow growers. I know when I had it, I can't remember which one it was. I think it was Bloody Mary. I know I've got a newer Bloody Mary now to replace it. That's that one over there. You can just see it there, very red. When I had a large plant of that, about the same size as this one, maybe a bit bigger, I had it in a conservatory. And at that particular time, we were letting the conservatory go down to about 5 degrees Celsius at night. And it did it in, as I could expect. That was really during the period when I was like transferring over between one greenhouse to the next. So that was just a case of too much going on. I couldn't cope with everything, and that was a consequence of doing that. So, right, what we're going to do, just before we get into repotting this, just have a quick chat about this. I'll try and be as quick as I can. So this is Nepenthes burkei, and it is a species, Nepenthes. It comes from, I think it comes from a particular island in the Philippines, one particular island, which I forget the name of. It's like an intermediate stroke highland Nepenthes. I think it's 1,100 metres to 2,000 metres, so it kind of straddles both areas there. The official temperatures that it goes down to are about 12, 13. Obviously I don't get it below 12, but it can go up to 28, so this is why it's a good all-rounder really. I don't think it would do particularly well in the warmer side just because it's not getting that nighttime drop. And very often you find with these plants, if they do get the drop, they very often want that drop, otherwise they just stop producing those pictures. It gets lots of humidity in there as well, just like its native habitat. So it kind of grows part way up a mountain and part way down a mountain. Is that the same? Up a mountain, down a mountain? I think it can grow like at the foothills of the mountains. So, named after a guy called David Burke back in the 19th century, a plant hunter who so-called discovered it. Actually discovered it and brought it to the West. I'm sure somebody who lives in the Philippines might have something to say about that, but that's where the name comes from anyway. There is another synonym where you get two I's on the end, but I think most people spell it with just an E-I on the end. So as far as media goes, I've got the media together. Now if you read any of the main kind of books on Nepenthes, I'm thinking of the couple that I introduced the other day. I'm trying to remember them now. One by Peter D'Amato and one by Adrian Slack. They both say quite clearly that Nepenthes are not really that fussy about what they grow in, despite the fact that other carnivorous plants do tend to be. So what I put them in, I tend to put mine in anyway, and so far so good, is what we've got down here, with one exception. So down here I've got together some perlite in the middle, some long fibered sphagnum moss on the left, and normally I would put them in some bark, but I'm trying coconut husk at the moment, and what that's going to mean for me anyway is I'm going to have to give it a wash through. That's been washed many more times than I care to remember, but it's still showing a TDS reading of still about roughly 100 parts per million, exactly 100 parts per million. So I'm going to give it another quick wash through, and it's just going to have to lump it because I can't afford to stand here and keep washing and washing and washing. I'll give it a wash through, and then I'll only give it RO water. So I did mention the other day, as far as feeding goes with Nepenthes, they catch what they catch, and that gives them as much fertiliser as they need. However, in the winter, I like to give them a little spray of like an orchid feed mix of about 200 parts per million, as per Peter D'Amato and Adrian Slack's advice. So I believe you can actually pour it through the media as well, which makes me think that giving it a media of about 100 parts per million isn't actually going to be that bad for it. It's not going to be instant death anyway. So what I'll just have to try to remember to do is just keep flushing for a while. In fact, I never actually feed them anyway. I always just flush. That's all I ever do. I never feed them other than the foliar spray. So I'm going to get these things together. I may do a quick time lapse of something just to speed things up a bit, just to see the washing procedure, and then I'll jump back on when I'm about to break into those roots and have a look what's going on inside, and somehow somehow try and do it without emptying out all these beautiful pictures or destroying any more of these beautiful pictures. Okay, that was RO water, so let's test what's come off that. I'm not expecting loads here. 148. Okay, so that's worse than I expected. I thought it would be about 100. But as I say, you know, at what point do you stop with this stuff? I'm just going to, it's better than when I first got it, put it that way. When I first got it, it was probably over 500, something like that. So that's what I'm going to use. So we'll just have to lump it. I think so long as it's used to getting a feed anyway, and it can get up to like 200 parts per million, no problem. With orchid feed, according to those two experts. So let's give it a go, and from now on all I will ever do is give it RO water, so it should eventually flush those salts out anyway, so I'm not too worried about it. Okay, so in the true spirit of Britishness and cocking things up, I have forgot to switch on the camera and just taught myself silly for the past half hour, so maybe that's for the best. So let's show you what I've actually done. So first of all, we've got our mix here. I've mixed it up. We've got long fibred sphagnum moss, we've got coconut husk, and we've got perlite. In no particular proportions, I've just stuck it all together, got a few handfuls, just through experience really, just through what I think looks good. As I say, Nepenthes aren't that fussy. It's not a case that you've got to have, you know, some proportion of this and some proportion of that. If you do want to find that out, then go and have a look at Peter D'Amato and Adrian Slack's books. I'm sure they'll tell you a proportion. But for me, this has worked perfectly fine. And of course, it depends on your own conditions as well. I know that this will keep it pretty moist. I know that it will be nice and airy, and it will also be loose and allow the water to drain through. And that's really what we need. And up here, I have just unpotted my Nepenthes. I've got 2 plants in that one pot, which I didn't realise, but it's fine. I'm going to keep them together because I don't really want like extra work for the same plant. So as you can see here, it was in like just like a peat really. I guess it's just peat. There's nothing else in it. As I say, they're not that fussy. As long as it's airy and you can let it drain through. One thing about peat though is that peat can dry out, and that was the issue, wasn't it? It can dry out if you get the sun on it, and it does have a tendency to pull away from the side of the pot. My mix won't do that. There's no way that coconut husks are going to pull away from the side of the pot and shrink. So that's one of the cons of using peat. So here you can see that hardly any roots at all. I mean, most of that you can see is the soil attached to it. I reckon there's about half a dozen roots there for this plant, and this one has even less. This one only has, well, again, about half a dozen, but the smaller outlay, the shorter roots. Very, very easy to miss and very, very easy to damage. So we don't want to damage them when we're putting them back or when we are unpotting. So you just got to be careful. You just got to like crumble it up between your fingers gently and try and break it up. So that's really how to unpot it. And I'm sorry you missed it. It was excellent. Honestly, it was the best unpotting I've ever done, and you missed it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is make sure I press play and record on the camera, and I'm going to have a go at repotting it, and let's get it into its new home. It's going to be in the same pot. There's no reason to put it in a different pot. It seems quite happy in there. So let's have a go at that. Okay, we've got one pot. We've got one Nepenthes. I'll start with the longer one first, because this is the one that's going to go with its roots further down to the bottom. Now, the problem with this bit, once you're at this stage, you've got these pitchers and tendrils that are hooking onto everything, and it's really, really frustrating not to make a mess. So that's how it's going to go anyway. So I'll start off with putting a little bit in the bottom. I mean, it's a really nice mix. I would like to grow in it myself, really. I mean, look at that. That is lovely. Okay, so we get that one in. Try and get it about the same level. I don't want this basil shoot to be buried, so it's going to go roughly about there. And what you don't want to be doing is like really packing it in and stuffing it down. Anybody that's used to planting temperate plants, that's quite alien to you, because that is something that you do. You do stuff it down in a temperate plant generally. It's going to be quite tricky to get it in and not bury the basil shoot. As usual, I've made too much of the mix. I either don't make enough or I make too much, and then I'm like struggling, trying to not waste it and wondering what to do with it. And obviously you can't unmix it once you've mixed it up. Well, this is me almost saving the peat bogs single-handedly. I don't know how. I'm not going to bury that. I don't know if you can see. If I stop putting my hand in front of the camera, you might be able to see. There we go. It's not going to be easy because you can see it is quite low down. I think that's going to be about the best I can do without burying the basil shoot. It's really hard to resist not packing it down. It's just so ingrained in me, such a natural thing to like be squishing the thing down. But that's it really, that's pretty much it. It's very light, it's lighter than it was with the peat, but that's good because that shows that it's nice and airy. We want it light, we want it loose, and obviously it's got to stay in, but I think it will. So I will get my wire hooks back on that. We'll run some more RO water through it, and I'll keep my eye on it, because if this media does start to drop, like the level starts to drop, which is possible, bearing in mind I've done it quite loosely, then I shall have to top it up a little bit. So fortunately I've made enough to probably repot every Nepenthes that I've got in here. I've got plenty left. It'd be a shame to chuck that out, so I'll have to keep that separately along with all the other extras that I do, and that should do it. So hopefully we have a healthy Nepenthes, or it will be a healthy Nepenthes again, and I can hang it up in a new place, not in the rafters this time. I shall have to hang it up somewhere to make sure that it's shaded, as we know at this time of year we are in very dangerous territory with that. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm sorry I missed part of it out, which is probably the bit that you tuned in for anyway. But I hope I explained it well enough. Give me a thumbs up if you thought that was useful. If you've got any more questions, please put them in the comments. I love to hear from people. And for now, I'll see you on the next one. Bye. And here it is, hanging back in its place. Pride of place. Hopefully not high up in the rafters, and hopefully not in a position where we're going to have any peat shrinkage. It looks okay. I don't think it's too damaged. I think we've managed to save it. So for now, I might move it again anyway, but for now it's going to stay there.